got?
I want to thank my friend from South Carolina. Look, there's been a lot of talk equating these impeachments. I'm very familiar with the last two impeachments. I was on judiciary during the first one. And remember, the second one didn't go through committee. It went through the Rules Committee. I sat in Mr. Negus's chair during that. So very familiar with the facts of both the impeachments. The first impeachment, just taking one at a time, was over a quid pro quo. I still think the quid pro quo didn't take place, but I do know who did have a quid pro quo, and that's Joe Biden. And you don't have to take my word for it. We have him on tape, dead to rights, bragging about shutting off aid to Ukraine in order to get a prosecutor, who's actually probably the one guy in that government that wasn't corrupt, that guy going after Burisma, which his son sat on the board of Burisma. Quite amazing. So in a sense, President Trump, the first impeachment, got impeached for something that Joe Biden actually did, and then went on TV and bragged about it. So it's quite amazing he would open the door to that. But there is and again, we're just here to decide if there should be an inquiry to proceed with investigations, and again, to compel the production of documents and the testimony of witnesses. But I'm looking at the facts here. I mean, I've got sheets and sheets of evidence here. The House Oversight Committee has uncovered that Owasco, which is Hunter Biden's shell company, that it received payments from Communist China on at least 3 occasions, made direct payments to Joe Biden in 2018. The Oversight Committee has also found that Joe Biden received about $250,000 in direct payments from his family members who are making this money through their corrupt influencing peddling schemes. Like, we know he got that money, and I'm sorry, that wasn't money to repay a car. That was $250,000 that went to Joe Biden. You also have $40,000 in laundered money from Communist China. The Oversight Committee also found tens of millions of dollars from foreign adversaries funneled to the Biden family through corrupt influence peddling schemes. You have Devin Archer testifying that on approximately 20 occasions, Joe Biden called in or was part of the speakerphone conversations during Hunter Biden's business meetings. I mean, this is just what's been uncovered so far, and this is without, again, the impeachment inquiry going forward. So I am convinced that if we move forward with the impeachment inquiry, we'll be able to show that the Biden family and their business associates received roughly $24 million, if not more, from foreign sources over the course of roughly 5 years. We'll probably be able to show that President Biden was personally involved in his family's foreign business dealings and business arrangements with others, and that Biden has not been truthful about his family's foreign business entanglements. But that is just a minimum to move forward with the impeachment inquiry. So again, you can compare it to the first Trump impeachment all you want, because in a lot of ways, like I've said, you impeach Trump for what Biden actually did. But with that, I yield back to my friend from South Carolina.
Is there any further discussion or debate on the amendment?
Mr. Chair.
Gentle ladies seek recognition?
Yes.
Gentle ladies recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I think that what was interesting about this interchange were a couple of key things. One is that much of this conversation that we heard from Mr. Roy and Mr. Washington dealt with accusations that I entered into the record earlier about how these reports and these statements have actually shown to be contrary to the testimony and contrary to the records and documents. Like even the reporting from conservative news outlets have said these statements that we just heard from Mr. Washington and from Mr. Roy and others have actually been debunked, inconsistent with the record, directly contrary to what is in evidence. But they also point to the fact that some of these things happened in 2017 and 2018. That was before President Biden was in office. The Republicans' own witnesses have testified that in order to pursue an impeachment against a sitting president, you have to identify wrongdoing by the president during his presidency. I quote, "The relevant office for impeachment should remain the presidency, not the vice presidency of Joe Biden." That's Jonathan Turley. That is your expert saying that out, setting that out. So all of the stuff that you've talked about is not relevant to the impeachment of President Biden sitting as President Biden. And I think that that's what it is. We're hearing all these conspiracy theories that have been debunked, that, you know, the record shows is not true, and in fact, want to talk about what really happened in Ukraine, ranking member?
Yeah, no, it's exhausting. It's exhausting to constantly have to correct the record when the record is clear. The gentleman from Pennsylvania was wrong about the prosecutor in Ukraine. I mean, you know, Vice President Biden's call for the resignation of Ukraine's corrupt prosecutor general, Viktor Shokin, the gentleman implies was somehow a secret effort to help Burisma, the Ukrainian energy company on whose board Hunter Biden served. The reality is that this was a falsehood put forward by, another, one of their star validators, Rudy Giuliani. In fact, Vice President Biden led a bipartisan international coalition calling on Ukraine to address corruption and reform the Prosecutor General's office led by Shokin. So far from helping Burisma or its owner, firing Shokin increased the likelihood that Burisma would actually be investigated. But, you know, my friends know this. I mean, this is not new information. They know what the truth is, but it doesn't matter. And so we know where all this is going, right? This is not an inquiry. My friends have decided they're going to do this no matter what. They're just going to have to try to cobble something together to actually bring an impeachment resolution to the floor. So that's what this is. This is not about the truth. This is not about facts. It's not about investigations. It's about pushing lies and distortions that have been corrected over and over and over again. And it, again, underlies our concern as to why my friends will not agree to an amendment saying that at least there has to be one public hearing or agree to a more open and transparent process. It is clear what's going on. But come on. I mean, you know, resuscitating and regurgitating debunked stories and conspiracy theories. I mean, I think my colleagues are better than that. I yield back.
Thank you, and I think that, you know, Mr. Chair, if I may enter into the record an Axios article titled, "Former Giuliani Associate Urges Comer to Abandon Biden Investigation."
Without objection.
Because this article describes how, you know, the whole Burisma conspiracy theory started with Giuliani and his associates. And even the people who were involved in that are saying, abandon it. There was nothing there. And they wrote a letter to Comer explaining how there was nothing there. And I would quote from this saying, wrote a scorching letter claiming there is simply no merit for the investigation. With all due respect, Chairman Comer, the narrative you are seeking for the investigation has been proven false many times over by a wide array of respected sources. And this is something that's in the record, but when Chairman Comer is asked about it, he says, well, I don't know anything about that, but it's in the record, it's been sent to them. And so to constantly raise this issue of Ukraine, when those who first sort of said, well, we have some dirt on the vice president are now recanting and saying, actually, there was nothing there. That's why we want the public hearings, so that this kind of information can be seen, can be televised. We want it to be televised so the American public can judge for themselves. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your time.
Certainly. Is there any further discussion or debate on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to insert an article into the record by Jonathan Turley, since his name was just invoked, outlining his very strong belief that there is significant evidence for this committee and this body, I should say, to pursue with respect to an impeachment inquiry, where he walks through the many reasons why that would be important with respect to the president, the vice, and in his role as vice president, and to answer the question that there is subsequent obstruction activities as president that would answer the question the gentlelady put forward. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Is there further discussion or debate on the amendment? Hearing none. The questions on the amendment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Roll call's been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Burgess. Burgess votes no. Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Reschenthaler. Mr. Reschenthaler, no. Mrs. Fishbach. No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Massey. No. Mr. Massey, no. Mr. Norman. No. Mr. Norman, no. Mr. Roy. No. Mr. Roy, no. Mrs. Houchin. No. Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy. No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. McGovern.
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon. Aye. Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse. Aye. Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Leisure Fernandez. Aye. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 9 nays.
And the ayes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Are there any further amendments? Hearing no requests for further amendments, I understand that my friend, our distinguished ranking member, Mr. Government, has some closing remarks. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just say that I always appreciate the tone and the civility and respect in which you conduct this committee's proceedings. You're a good man. I just wish you voted with me more. But on this occasion, I have to note that I'm deeply disappointed that we are going to advance this shameful impeachment inquiry, which is only going to further divide this country. The things that my Republican colleagues say about President Biden are unhinged, untethered to reality, let alone substantiated by the evidence. Maybe these are the alternative facts that they always talk about. But it's been said already, but it bears repeating. This Republican majority is abusing and weaponizing the impeachment process to go after President Biden with not a shred of evidence that he did anything wrong. In fact, they're doing so despite a mountain of evidence that President Biden has always followed the law. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I just want to speak directly to the people of America. You need to know that Republicans here in Washington still refuse to accept that Joe Biden won. They refuse to accept that in a free and fair election, President Biden got 7 million more votes and won the Electoral College. Now, they might be cute about it. They say things like Joe Biden is president, but they will not admit he won fair and square. Or maybe they don't care because they have contempt for you, the voters. They tried to stop the certification of the results to prevent Joe Biden from becoming president. Many of them still cheer on the insurrectionists. Many Republicans supported what the violent mob was trying to do. They wanted Trump to stay in power. The people's votes be damned. You know, I was one of the last people off the House floor on January 6, 2021. I took over for Speaker Pelosi after she was evacuated. I saw them pounding at the door in the Speaker's lobby, trying to get at us, trying to kill us. Trump sent them here to this building to reverse the election results and certify that he won, even though he lost. And now the MAGA extremists who have control of this place want to finish the job. They still want to overturn the election. And what they couldn't accomplish on January 6th, they want to do with this extreme political stunt. They will do whatever it takes to win, and if we lose our democracy in the process, so be it. When it comes right down to it, this absurd impeachment inquiry has nothing to do with the integrity of President Biden. Not a thing. And it has everything to do with the lack of integrity in the Republican Party, which has been taken over by MAGA extremists. And no amount of evidence could convince them that Joe Biden did nothing wrong, because they aren't looking for the truth. They're looking for revenge. Their partisan impeachment stunt has no credibility, no legitimacy, and no integrity. And no vote could possibly make this baseless fishing expedition legitimate. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I understand my friend from Pennsylvania also has some closing remarks he would like to make. The gentleman's
I
recognized.
do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going through a whole bunch of remarks from President Joe Biden calling President Trump an illegitimate president, but I'll set those aside for now. I'd like to enter into the record. I'd ask unanimous consent to enter a written statement from Professor Turley from the United States House of Representatives Committee on Oversight and Accountability from the 28th of September, 2023.
Without objection.
Thanks. I just think that this is so fitting just to read a brief portion of this, because it explains exactly what we're here to do today. And Professor Turley said, and I quote, "My testimony also reflects the fact that I do believe that after months of investigation, the House has passed the threshold for an inquiry into whether President Joe Biden was directly involved or benefited from the corrupt practices of his son, Hunter, and others. I believe the record has developed to the point that the House needs to answer troubling questions surrounding the president. He goes on to say, the record currently contains witness and written evidence that the president, 1, has lied about key facts in these foreign dealings, 2, was the focus of a multi-million-dollar influence peddling scheme, and 3, may have benefited from his corruption through millions of dollars sent to his family, as well as more direct possible benefits. The president may be able to disprove or rebut these points, but they raise legitimate concerns over his role based on the accounts of key figures in the matter. So I would just like to point to the statement of Professor Turley, and thank you for putting in the record. I yield back.
Absolutely, thank you. Before we proceed with the resolution, let me make a few closing remarks. First, I want to thank everybody on the panel on both sides of the aisle. Clearly, this is a difficult subject to talk about. Clearly, there are sharp differences of opinion, but I was very pleased with the demeanor that everybody went about making their points. I do want to refocus this. We've heard a great deal about President Trump. We've heard a great deal about President Biden. The purpose of the hearing is really simply about setting up a process. No one here should have a predetermined outcome in mind as to where they think we're going. You might have a predilection, but none of us know all the facts. And the reality is that is what we're seeking to do, is to empower committees to have the ability to fully investigate charges and come to independent conclusions and make a recommendation. At that point, whatever it is, if they decide to recommend anything at all, then the House will deal with it. So we covered a lot of ground, but some of it wasn't directly related to the process, and I think it's important to know that. The commitment I'll make to each of you on this committee is we'll continue to do our job in a fair and professional manner. You'll certainly continue to have your ability to make your points and your point of view known. I don't ever expect unanimity on the Rules Committee. It's not set up to achieve that. But again, I do want to conclude by reminding people there's a process that's underway. There's legitimate concerns and investigations. We're simply trying to give the investigators the tools they need to get to the truth, report back to the Congress, and then the Congress will be free to take whatever action, if any, it decides to take. So again, I thank all of you for your vigorous participation, but your professional demeanor and your civility and courtesy to one another. It genuinely is a privilege to serve in each and every one of you, with you, even when we don't agree. And Mr. McGovern, like you, I wish you voted with me more often too. So we can go from there. With that, do we have any further amendments? Okay, hearing no request for further amendments, the question is now on favorably reporting House Resolution 918 to the House. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no.
No.
The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
For roll call.
Roll call has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Burgess.
Burgess votes aye.
Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Reschenthaler. Aye. Mr. Reschenthaler, aye. Mrs. Fishbach. Aye. Mrs. Fishbach, aye. Mr. Massey.
Aye.
Mr. Massey, aye. Mr. Norman. Aye. Mr. Norman, aye. Mr. Roy.
Aye.
Mr. Roy, aye. Mrs. Houchin. Aye. Mrs. Houchin, aye. Mr. Langworthy.
Aye.
Mr. Langworthy, aye. Mr. McGovern.
No.
Mr. McGovern, no. Ms. Scanlon. No. Ms. Scanlon, no. Mr. Neguse. No. Mr. Neguse, no. Ms. Leisure-Fernandez. No. Ms. Leisure-Fernandez, no. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk will report the total.
9 yeas, 4 nays.
The ayes have it. The resolution is ordered to be reported favorably to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes to the resolution.